Hi there, it's me, Stephen Thomas, with Reports on Housing, and we're bringing you another housing debrief. And this one is, what would a recession mean for housing? So many people jump to conclusions. We're gonna dive right into it and let you know kind of what's going on. There's a lot of recession talk recently, and a lot of that has to do with the economic slowdown, the repercussions of the tariffs that are across the board, and the odds of a recession occurring, according to a lot of experts across the United States, they're increasing. And it's increasing the longer these tariffs stay. It was definitely going to be a recession had we had all those reciprocal tariffs that were pulled off a couple weeks ago, but there's still a 10% tariff across the board. And still there's a lot of economists across the United States that are talking about the potential recession rising, and many saying it's like a 50-50 or even higher than that chance of us going to a recession in the United States. And this week, what brought recession talk to a head was the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and their real GDP tracker, what they came up with for the first quarter of 2025, you could see that on the right hand side, it's actually negative for the quarter. So it was down, and a lot of people were a little bit concerned and thinking, "Uh-oh, are we slipping into a recession right now?" And wait just a second. We've got to peel back the onion a little bit, talk about why there was this negative reading in GDP. And when you look at GDP, there are different components to it. And one of them is net exports. And because of the tariffs that were going to go into effect at the beginning of April, what happened was a lot of firms across the United States, they ordered a lot of goods, and the net exports was really negative. And you could go back in time, and it was very, very negative for the quarter. And the reason for that is because people are stockpiling before the tariffs actually rise. And you could see this going back in time, what that net exports looks like year over year. It's not that big of a difference in prior quarters, but a giant difference for the first quarter of 2025, which is understandable because if you're going to be paying these gigantic tariffs on all goods across the board, especially in China, you're going to stockpile as much as possible, especially goods coming from China. So there was a lot of that was occurring during the first quarter of 2025. And if you actually look at the net exports on a quarterly basis, and you look to see where we were in the first quarter of 2025, you go back all the way to 2008, we have not had this big of a net exports difference. So it is off the charts. It's unprecedented, but we're also, there are tariffs across the board. And the last time we had tariffs like this across the board dates all the way back to like 1930. So we don't have all the accurate data going back to there, but you can see that net exports was way off what a normal mark would be. And that has everything to do with the tariffs. And so you're wondering, are we in a recession? Are we in a recession? First, I'd like to bring in our sponsor, and we'll answer that and what the implications of a recession are for housing. But after this sponsorship break, and we want to thank Angie Sandoval from JMJ Financial for sponsoring this week's episode of the Housing Debrief. And you can reach Angie at 310-418-9722. That's 310-418-9722. And it's Angie Sandoval with JMJ Financial, the Thibodeau Morel Group. And they have this great product. It's bank statement loans. And just to go over it, it's non-traditional income verification. So bank statement loans, people are scratching their head, how in the world can you do those today? But there are a subset of borrowers out there that kind of would qualify because they have money in the bank, but they can't really qualify because of the way that they put together their taxes. So this is just a bank statement loan. And this is primary residence and second homes. The credit utilization was based on LTV, FICO, and liquidity. income documentation not required, income not stated, debt to income, that's DTI, is not calculated. So this assets seasoning for 30 days, loan amounts up to $3 million, up to 80% LTV purchase with rate and terms, and LTV up to 70% on cash out refinances, FICO's beginning at 640, and reserves from 12 months. So this is what the program is. They've got this great bank statement loan program. You can contact Angie Sandoval with JMJ Financial. Work with a lender you can trust. The JMJ Financial, the Thibodeau Morel Group, Angie Sandoval, JMJ Financial, 310-418-9722. That's 310-418-9722. Thanks, Angie, for your sponsorship. And now, are we in a recession? And the answer is no. We're not in a recession right now because of the indicators that we talked about. It has to do with imports more than anything else that threw us into the negative numbers. But we are beginning to see a little bit of economic activity that is cooling, but you're not seeing it across the board. There are a lot of cars that are being purchased. A lot of big ticket items were being purchased right now before tariffs go into effect and actually affect the supply chain enough where you're going to see like automobiles that they're going to get more expensive. So a lot of people jumped ahead of that, worrying about automobiles becoming more expensive and purchasing ahead of time. So we're not going to see it in the purchase numbers until we start to see the prices go up. And then we're going to see what happens to retail sales, including autos. And you're going to see that there will be a difference down the road. So the question is, what would happen, though, if we do go into one? Because the odds have increased for us going into a recession here in the United States, and it looks like that could be later on in the year. Some people argue that we're in one now, but that's not necessarily correct because we're recording this on Friday, May 2nd, and this was Jobs Friday, and actually Jobs report came out, and it was still stronger than expectations, and as a result of it being stronger than expectations, actually rates rose, which means that the Fed won't be able to make those rate cuts until a little bit later on in this year. So that's it's showing that the jobs front is still really strong. And so we have not really seen jobs, unemployment rise. And as a result of that, we're not really in a recession until you see some sort of breakage on the jobs side of things. But if we were to go into recession, what would happen? And a lot of people jump to conclusions and immediately think this is the absolute worst thing that can possibly happen to housing. And I remember the financial crisis. I remember what that was like. I remember the Great Recession, how values came down so much. But I need to go over why we're not going to see where values plummet during a recession, what typically happens during a recession. And the reason that we're not going to get the prices that cave and drop like 20% or more than 20%, 25, 30%. That's what we're talking about when there's a housing crash. And we're not going to get that because the overall housing stock, all the houses collectively across the United States are built on top of strong credit, great jobs, low fixed payments, which are a hedge against inflation and rising rents. And a lot of these people refinanced down to these really, really low levels or purchased during the COVID years from about 2020 and got new refinanced to rates or purchased at these very, very low rates at below 3% or in the twos or in the threes or even in the fours. And they're very happy with their mortgage rate. And there's a record amount of tappable equity. There's a record amount of equity rich, which means you're 50% plus, 50% plus equity in your home. And there's a record number that own their homes free and clear, which is about 40% across the United States. And if you look at all the people that have more than 50% equity or that are record own, the numbers that own their homes free and clear. So you look at those two, equity rich and own free and clear, and it's 2/3 of the housing stock. So 2/3 of the housing stock is sitting with just a tremendous amount of equity. And there's still a lot of people across the United States that have a tremendous amount of equity that aren't necessarily have 50% plus equity, but they still have in the 30s or 40s. And so there's a lot of equity out there, this strong credit and great jobs. It's not like these people can all of a sudden, they're going to get in this giant pickle and they're going to leave. A lot of people understand that their underlying payment is so low that renting would be more expensive than keeping their own home. So they're going to do everything in their power to keep their home, even if they got in a pickle. But there's very few people that are in pickles. That's the number one reason why the health of the housing stock, as to why we won't see prices crash. Another reason why is, even though we've built a lot more inventory this year than last year, and definitely compared to a couple of years ago, inventory has been growing, and in some markets has exceeded where we were prior to the pandemic a little bit. 2017 and 18 and 19, we look at the 3 years prior to the pandemic, and there's a lot of markets that are making their way or already surpassed that level. So they have more inventory, but even with the more inventory, this shows you, this is National Association of Realtors, where the inventory levels are at. And on the right-hand side, we still don't have a lot of homes yet on the market currently today, but there are a lot more today this year than there were last year, more than there were a couple of years ago. So we're building an inventory, but it's still low inventory compared to the supply glut that we accumulated prior to the Great Recession, as early as the fall of 2005, and hit 4 million homes in 2006, 7, and 8. There are 1,360,000 homes on the market across the United States that NAR just recently, earlier this month, released for the prior month. And so there's not a lot of homes that are still out there. There are more than there were the last few years, but still not that many, where you have way too much supply and very little demand, and as a result, prices cave. Because where we're at demand-wise is very low, and it's very similar to Great Recession levels. However, the big difference and caveat is we have way less supply than we did back then. So when you match up this real low supply with this very, very low demand, that's where we've still seen prices rise. But as inventory levels continue to increase right now, before rates go down down the road, what we'll see is that there will be more pressure on pricing, and prices won't go up as much as they have in the past several years, even though we've had these higher rates. But there is a real stickiness to prices, and the reason for that is there are not that many homeowners across the United States that absolutely have to sell. So there's not that many people that are in pickles. Those are the people that have to sell, that they're in some crunch or crisis where they have to sell. There's not a lot of people where they absolutely have to sell across the United States. So as a result, when you have those kind of people, they're not going to be interested in reducing the price down considerably. They'll just stay in their house, and they'll peel off of the housing inventory down the road if they're unsuccessful, which there will be a lot more people that will be unsuccessful with this many people that are coming on the market this year. And what happens when we do go into recession across the United States? Well, if you actually look at this goes back up to 1980. So if you look at the last 6 recessions we've had, only twice did the values come down, and it only went down slightly in 1991, and that was because of the savings and loan scandal in California, and California brought the whole United States down slightly in 1991 as far as value is concerned. But in 2008 we had the great financial crisis, the Great Recession, and yes, values really caved, and everybody knows that story. And there was a lot of people that fogged a mirror. They had subprime loans, they had pick-up payment plans, they had these adjustable rate mortgages that adjusted on a monthly basis. So, and there was a lot of fraud. There were dead people, people that had passed away, people that utilized those Social Security numbers in order to purchase properties. I mean, there was a lot going on back then, and it set up just this giant financial crisis, and a lot of it had to do with Wall Street and how they packaged up mortgage-backed securities, which are just a whole bunch of mortgages put together in a package that they buy on Wall Street. And that was a time when it was a house of cards that was ready to collapse, versus today's housing stock is made out of concrete with rebar versus back then house of cards. That it was definitely going to collapse as soon as values started to go down even slightly. It created a real ripple effect and problem. So, and you can't even really see this, but if you look up closely, this is every single year going back to 1942. And this just shows you the negative years where it was negative and this is according to Kay Schiller, it was negative in 1990, and it was negative during the Great Recession as well. So there's really only two times where we really realized across the United States values coming across the United States. Does that mean there are some markets where there are not markets across the United States that do not have prices coming down? You know what? There are a lot of markets across the U.S. that are experiencing prices that are going down. But the vast majority of markets across the United States still have values on the rise. So there will be markets, but the overall arching theme is that values have continued to go up, and they will continue to go up. And but now, if we slip into a recession down the road, what will happen is there will be increases in unemployment. And when we have people unemployed looking for a job that are terminated from their employment, that's where the Fed's going to step in. Because once the job market cracks, the job arena cracks, what happens is the Fed will step in. They have a dual mandate. It's maximum employment and keeping prices under control. So that's inflation. Now, but once we have the labor market breaking, the Fed's going to want to step in. There's a lot of Fed presidents right now that are talking about we should get ahead of the curve because there's going to be some problems down the road and we will get some job loss. So we should be reducing prior to that job loss taking place. But the majority of the Fed is looking at it right now as wait and see. They want to see some breakage first before they jump in. So when we do get that break in employment and it does start to come down, that's where the Fed's gonna step in, and they will cut rates. And when they cut rates, we will see that as a result of these negative readings with jobs, rates will come down immediately once we start seeing these negative readings, because it's going to pave the way for the Fed to make these rate cuts, and 30-year mortgage rates actually start to come down before the Fed even makes those rate cuts, because they understand the Fed will make rate cuts down the road, and we start to get an easing in interest rates as soon as those economics numbers start showing that there is job loss and breakage. So 5% used to be that golden rate that we used to talk about. And it was true for quite some time. We said 5.5% is like the most beautiful rate. As soon as we get to that, it's going to be really a crazy market. But no longer is it 5%, because we have not been in the fives. It'll go on. It'll be 3 years. That'll be 36 months come in August. And that's just a few short months away. We'll be at 36 months since the last time we had an interest rate in the fives. So now, all of a sudden, now that we're further and further away from that time period where we even had interest rates in the fives, people are beginning to, they're pretty happy with if we could just get down to 6. So 6% is becoming the new golden rate that we've been talking about. We could actually see it in the numbers. See, right now where we're at today, because of that really great jobs report, we're at 6.9% in interest rates today. It's at 6.90 across the United States, according to Mortgage News Daily, with no points. Now, there was a time where we had rates that were nice below 6.5%. And it was below 6.5%, and it was down to 6.1% for 1 week. And we saw a definitive bump in demand, pending sales activity that we normally do not see in the fall market. So this happened in September, and we saw an immediate change in pending sales activity the fall of last year. And that's just us being down at 6.1% mortgage rates for a week. So it was at below 6.5% for 47 days. So there was 47 days of a glorious market. And it's just a window into down the road, if we can just get down to 6%. 6% is a golden rate. And we just need to be below 6.5 for duration for a longer period of time than 47 days. And it will make a material change in the marketplace. So, and you could see that 6.5% and below, that would be absolutely a beautiful thing. And it would allow a bunch of people that have been waiting to purchase the ability to purchase. So when rates fall, there's this demographic patch, and we've talked about it many times before, but this is this demographic patch of millennials that they have been wanting to purchase for quite some time, but have not been able to get into the market because of being priced out of the market, kind of with affordability, with rates being so high. So that's been an absolute issue. And it was when we had this strong demographic patch every year, and you could see that those brackets of the strong demographic patch, the number of people that were turning like 30, 32, that's that prime first-time home buyer age, that were unable to purchase. Those first-time home buyers, year after year after year, they've accumulated. They've wanted to purchase. We're actually missing 1 million buyers per year for several years. And normally we don't talk about this pent-up demand, but there are a lot of millennials that are waiting to purchase. The thing that they need to have happen is it's either for prices to crash, which is not going to happen, or for rates to come down. And rates just getting down to 6% make a meaningful difference in affordability levels and the amount of home a buyer, potential buyer can purchase. So these millennials and Gen Zs, they have been waiting on the sidelines. They cannot wait for rates to come down. And we just got that little sneak peek for a brief period of time. And now there are way more homes on the market for them to dive into compared to 1 year ago once rates do make their way down to 6%. So what will happen is once rates make their way down to 6%, demand will absolutely increase. We will see that demand goes way up. The number of pending sales will go way up. And as a result, we'll see more buyers out in the marketplace. There will be a lot more buyers out in the marketplace in the entry-level ranges. And you can actually see these people have masks. This was really taken down in San Diego. There were lines of people waiting to get in because they had to get in one at a time. But you could see how many people were interested in purchasing. And it was because rates had made their way down. And then we were in the midst of a pandemic. Home values, when you get demand that all of a sudden increases and you get more buyers than the number of homes that are available, that's when we start to see a shift in home values, and home values will increase. They're not going to skyrocket because we still have interest rates at 6%, but they will go up at a faster pace than what we've generated over the last few years. So, and I understand people say, yeah, Stephen, but there's going to be a lot of unemployment that's out there. But here's the thing. The labor force is 167 million people across the United States. That's as of the first quarter of 2025. So if unemployment rate were to rise from where it is right now, 4.2 to up to 5%, that would mean that 8.35 million people would be out looking for work. And so that still leaves a total number of 158.65 in the labor force that are able to look for a property and a house. And, at the end of the day, that's a lot of people that are been waiting for interest rates to come down. So these millennials that have been waiting, that have a good job, not everyone's going to be terminated. There will be an increased number of the unemployed. However, there will be a lot of people that will still be gainfully employed. They've been sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to come down. And what does this resemble? It resembles COVID. Because if you remember, when we went into COVID, we had this forbearance, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of people went into forbearance. They couldn't move. They couldn't do anything. They weren't paying they lost their jobs temporarily, and they couldn't pay their monthly payment. But with forbearance, they were able to negotiate afterwards what they did with the payments that they've missed. A lot of them put them at the end of their loan, or there's an installment plan. There's a lot of different things that they did. But at the end of the day, even in the midst of all those people in forbearance, during COVID-19, when we had rates that dropped, it ignited a lot of demand. So there's a lot of pending sales activity that just all of a sudden totally increased in the midst of a pandemic. And it was very hard to see a house. It was one person at a time, all masked up. Everybody had to make sure that their hands were clean and they had masks on, and it was one party at a time. And that was the way that it worked during COVID-19. But still, these buyers managed to go out there and look for a home because of where how rates had dropped. And so something similar, you have to understand, we've been stuck right around 7% for such a long time, or above 7% for such a long time. To make it down to 6% and just to stay at 6% is going to increase a lot of demand, and it's going to change the overall marketplace. So if you liked what you saw and understood what we're talking about, because this is what we follow. We've been following this since 2004. So we understand when things do really slow down, what a market slowdown looks like, when values do crater, when values don't, what happens during recessions. So if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to it, go to Reports on Housing, subscribe to one of our many reports that dot throughout SoCal, the Bay Area, Phoenix, Maricopa, Vegas, Clark County. And the most recent report that just came out is called Fracture in the Market. And that just talks about this recent slowdown in the number of homes that are coming on the market. It's kind of like a cracks that we're starting to see because we're not in a recession right now. We don't have job loss until that time when we have job loss and rates come down. It's just creating, there are more homeowners that are coming on the market. As sellers, they're accumulating and the market is slowing. So we're talking about that in fracture in the market. So if you'd like to subscribe, you could utilize the coupon code RECESSION for a free month. And even if you if you do the annual subscription, you will get 13 months for that annual subscription. So thank you so much for joining us for another housing debrief. I really appreciate it. My name is Stephen Thomas from Reports on Housing, and I hope you have a great finish to your week, and we will see you on the other side.